right, everyone. Welcome to another Buzz Slayers interview. Today, we are here with Elisabeth Hoffman. And you have, first of all, how was your holiday? Did you have a good Christmas? I see the Christmas tree in the background. Did you have a good Christmas?
I had a great Christmas. It's one of my favorite seasons of the year. So
Of
Christmas
course.
tree is going to stay up till after New Year's.
Yeah, beautiful. Did you spend it with the fam or what?
Yes, it was a family-filled Christmas. So
Oh my God,
a
awesome.
little bit more pared down than it has been in the past. It was great to spend some time with family and just have like a low-key holidays.
All right, so Elisabeth, I know you were going to talk about you have a new single coming up as well, but you did release an EP, Quo Vadis, which was really, really good. And it was, to me, it was kind of like a blend of a bunch of stuff. To me, it felt like there was some Americana influence. There was contemporary pop. It had a little bit of cinematic vibes. But really what got me was this kind of beautiful range of instrumentation and use of those instruments throughout it. Like, I think Mannequin's my favorite track on that EP.
Okay.
Is that a sitar? That's a sitar, right, on that?
It is the sitar, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of my biggest things I wanted to ask you, because I know for your previous projects, you played bass in some of your previous project as well. So for this project that you're doing right now, one of my big things I really wanted to ask you was, I know you write all the stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So are these for the recordings, are they like hired studio musicians, like hired guns, or is this like a band that you have kind of together to do stuff with?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of people actually don't know the answer to that. But so funny enough, this is all just me. So I actually play and sing everything except for the drum set.
Whoa.
And that's been really fun. So that's like a personal project of mine because, as you said, most people know me as a bassist, and that is primarily what I do. But I also do dabble in other instruments as well.
So I'm gonna back it up a second. So on this EP, aside from the drums, you're playing all the other instruments for the most part?
Yep, that's correct.
Oh my God, you're like a multi-instrumentalist.
I am. I think a lot of people don't know that, and it's something that I take pride in. And so this project has been really cool for me to just like put that on display. Although, as I mentioned before, it's not something I necessarily talked about a lot, but yeah. I do like when people ask me about it.
Yeah, no. I was very curious about that. So this recording itself for the EP that you did, you went in and tracked a lot so you had someone come in, probably track the drums first. You probably explained how to lay that out to an extent, right? And then that person came in, laid down the drums, and then you were kind of like, so did you do a lot of this at a big studio, or do you have like a home studio area that you kind of track all this stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So I do go into a big studio. I've been using the Bridge Sound and Stage. They're friends of mine, but they're also just a phenomenal studio that's won several Boston Music Awards. Just a lovely space and lovely people to work with. So I've worked with Alex Allenson, who's produced and recorded the majority of the things that I've worked on. Wow. But yeah, you're right. So I as a bassist, I start with the bass and drums, and that's been just our basics. And generally, it's kind of a funny process, honestly, when you're working like basically on your own.
Yeah.
Versus with a band, it's just been a dramatically different experience.
I'm sure.
So one of the kind of funny ways I go about doing that is I actually program everything into notation software first. And so I will give the drummer I'm working with like a MIDI demo, which sounds like a video game, Right. And then we kind of go through the process of like building from the ground up and creating this piece of music out of what was once this like, sounds like an 8-bit soundtrack.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm like the dude that wants to hear the 8-bit versions of that too.
I thought of like releasing them as like a special edition, but some part of me is like a little like humiliated by how bad they sound.
No, that would be so much fun because I think that here's the thing. People that are not necessarily like maybe not musicians, people that are avid fans of music, like me, like I play guitar and stuff like that. But in terms of like, you just kind of took me by surprise. Like, oh yeah, I'm playing pretty much everything except the drums. I'm like, what? So immediately, I love that you explained that because I immediately wanted to know the process of that. Like how on earth do you? You have like your own way of kind of doing what we would call a scratch track, basically, of like a demo of the songs, and then you bring them into your guy at the studio. and you guys just bang it out and hammer this whole thing out. And so how long did it take for this EP for Quo Vadis? How long did it take for you to finally get, this is a 3-track record, by the way. So how long did it take you to do these 3 songs? And they're not short songs. These are big songs that are lush and have a lot of instrumentation going on. Like we said, sitar, there's keys, there's guitars, electric, acoustic guitars, live bass, live drums. How long did that process take you to finally even just mixed and mastered and done?
Yeah. So, as I'm thinking of the timeline, so actually, if I was just talking about recording,
Yeah.
kind of surprisingly, we laid down most of the instrumentation in one day. So it was like a 10-hour studio day, and I'm a super driven person. I like to be really prepared. I think through years of recording, especially recording with the people that I worked with this time around, I've kind of honed in on my process of like consolidating time, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And so there's something to be said for working with just yourself, where I kind of am aware of how much time I might take for things. And so versus a group, which can be a little bit, you know, there's like a lot of moving pieces. And so we just went in there and we you know, I knew what order I wanted to do things in, and I knew generally how much time it would take to get the instruments down. So in one full day, we did most of the instruments. I went back a second day, I think maybe a
for
day
3 songs? For all 3 songs?
Yeah.
Okay, so you do understand that even, you know, even for someone that's fully prepared to be able to track all that instrumentation for 3 full songs in one day is still insanely impressive. Like you realize that, right? Like I'm sure if you told other people, they'd be like, what? Like I'm blown away at that factor. And people that are going to watch this interview are going to be like, oh my God. Because that's honestly, dude, I'm telling you, I've sat around for probably 200 session, you know, recording sessions. You know, we've, you know, I do mastering, you know, mixing, all that kind of stuff. I've sat through tons of different bands, and for someone to lay down 3 full tracks and all that instrumentation that's technically, aside from the drums, just you, is a very impressive thing. That's an amazing answer. I can't believe that you do all this stuff by yourself. I was noticing, you know, here's something I would want to know. Like, how did this, as you know, as a musician, as obviously, like you said, you're obviously very driven. You're going into the studio and knocking out full EPs pretty much by yourself, and then on top of that, doing all the vocals, of course, which is, you know, that's the glue of everything. And you have an amazing voice, by the way. I'm not just saying that. You have a great, yeah, no, you definitely blend this kind of like classic kind of almost, I'm a big fan of artists like Billie Holiday, for example. And to me, you're not like fully that, but you I think that old kind of vintage vocal approach is slightly maybe kind of an influence in your approach sometimes. And I love hearing that, the way it sounds over the music, because the music of this record was, you know, like I said, it was like contemporary pop, but, you know, it had Americana influence to me. You know, I was picking up on a little, it wasn't like fully like the Southern country record, of course, but it was also kind of theatrical and honest as well. And that was something that I really liked, because you got pretty descriptive, especially with a song like Mannequin, which is my favorite track on the record. That one I listened to the most, because not just because of the sitar, which was amazing. Like you're playing sitar on that. It's like, what? It's like, what? But you know, that was a track that was very descriptive visually, kind of. And the way you described everything, and, you know, but it was also kind of metaphoric in a way too. So you were very descriptive in how you described like the sun going down and now the night came, and, you know, and it's that song to me was kind of existential in a way. It got kind of deep. And here's the thing with the songs that you did with this record, is they can be taken a little differently by the listener, you know, which is the beauty of music, obviously. You know, people relate to their own situations, their own people in their own lives, what they're listening to. So your music can touch a person in a different way, depending who the listener is. Obviously, of course, you know that. And so for me, Mannequin was like this kind of existential track, but I was also able to visualize a lot of the stuff that you were kind of being descriptive with on the song. And that track just kind of like, you know, that track hit me pretty good, that one. But there's a lot going on this record. And I was curious about, like, you know, how it all started for you in terms of were you singing as a kid? Like, what happened? Did your mom play records for you when you were like little, and then you like give me some of that juice? I want to hear some of that.
Yeah, I grew up in a really big family, really musical family, and I always thought that I would be a visual artist, and that was just what I wanted to do. I would draw all the time, but I just grew up listening to my dad play his 12-string guitar, which made it on this record actually. And yeah, so that was a little hidden gem there. And just being surrounded by music, like my family loves music. We were always listening to something, singing as a family. I grew up singing in church. And so I just, as I progressed through, like growing up as a kid into a young adult, I just made this transitional decision, I guess, where my whole life I thought I would go to school to be an illustrator or a designer, which is still very prevalent in my life. But then I just have this passionate relationship with music, and I actually I'm a music teacher actually as my profession, and so I went to school to become a music teacher, and along the way just made the decision that like singing and performing is always going to be part of my life as well. It's not just the teaching portion, which is important and fabulous in itself, but just continuing to be a performer and making space for that. And I think as an adult, it can be hard to make space for your passions. Like we're tired and we work, and and so it's really important to me to make that space. So here I am at the trained basis, but I also just have a passion for singing, and that makes its way through everything I do as well.
Yeah, you're just a very thriving creative person. I think that you thrive off creation. You mentioned, I was going to bring it up. You mentioned it a little for a brief moment there, but I also did notice that fashion is a big part of your life. I mean, you can see here, and you also have your Instagram, and you have so you also are very interested in fashion, and you're obviously very good at photography, and so it's like I feel like you're just like one of those people that if you're not creating something at some point, you just don't feel like you're progressing in a certain sense, and you just have to do it, and that's what real kind of artistry is kind of about, to be able to do it for yourself to a certain extent.
I agree with that. I think that it's like life-giving, and it can be really draining. And I think actually circling back to the EP a little bit, I was kind of in a stage of life for some time, kind of unbeknownst to me. It was kind of like couldn't see it till I was out of it, where I wasn't creating for so long, and I didn't really realize that. And I ended up making some really big changes, like significant changes, kind of all at once, that gave me space to create. And it wasn't really intentionally for that reason. It was for other things, but this wave of creativity just came back to me, and this like solo project kind of came out of it. And to your point of just creating anything, it's like I had this thought recently. I was like, on my social media, like it might be confusing that I have like design and fashion and photography, and like I do visual art as well. And I thought, no, it doesn't matter, because it's for me. And if the listener or the viewer can get something out of it that's meaningful for them, then like that's all it is,
That's brilliant. Yeah, that was very, very well put in terms of, giving yourself space and coming back and being able to just openly create and do it for yourself, so that you can just basically live the life that you want to live and be who you want to be, and express yourself. And you're also correct in terms of people will, that's also another great aspect of art in many forms, is people will reflect off of it. You know what I mean? People will see themselves in a lot of different kinds of art, especially if they're done with certain levels of intensities, or it doesn't even matter really in terms of that. It's just who the person is that's interpreting it.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I think especially in songwriting, it's like you mentioned it being personal. It is personal, and it's like it doesn't necessarily have to be like I'm singing from my experience, but the listener may not know my experience, and that's okay. And it's I think you had mentioned too, like whatever you get out of it as a listener, if it's connecting to you and you're feeling something, then that's really the most important thing, right? Like I don't need people to know my story necessarily. Like I can sing and be honest and true to myself, and sing my experiences, because we're all human and we share experiences, whether they're the same experience or not. You might have the same emotion, or you might have gone through something, so it's really cool to hear people reflect back to you. Actually, I think the the best thing as a creator, I guess, like an artist, is just to have people reflect back to you and say like, oh, I felt something. And then you hear, and it's honestly cooler to me if they say it's something completely different.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, oh, I went through that, and it's something that you didn't sing about. You're like, great, like tell me more.
Yeah.
If my music can reach you, then that's like, then I've done it, you know.
So I wanted to ask in terms of, so do you play like, do you do live performances? Like even like you in an acoustic or something like that?
Yeah, I've done one so far. It's funny, like way back in college, I used to perform as just a solo musician, and now I'm circling back to it later in life. But I do have a show in January that I will be just playing my guitar, and I think the really honest, raw answer is I'm still figuring it out, because now that it's just me in the studio, aside from a drummer that I would work with, you know, I have to figure out exactly how I want to proceed with the live stuff. But I think it's definitely on the docket, and it will happen at some point.
Okay, so this is going to be a tough one. This is something I always ask, you know, an interesting, you know, interview. I wanted to know, for you personally, some people don't like this question.
Okay.
Some people don't like this question. Top 5 all-time musical influences, and it doesn't have to be singers. It could just be like I said before. Maybe your mom played a certain record when you were a kid, and that snapped you. And whoa, you know, what changed you? When did you fall? How did you fall in love with music? Yeah.
As far as music influences, so I just am in love with the music of the 60s, like the mid-century. I adore the Beatles. I think that as far as songwriting goes, I mean, a lot of people have this answer, but it's really true, because they're just incredible songwriters. Yeah, just the writing of Paul McCartney and John Lennon. And so I think that was a big influence in my life early on, just being, just growing up listening to them. The Beatles were in my house a lot, so I think it's you know, it's a great way to grow up. I think that's a great basis for whatever style you end up gravitating towards. They just influence so many people, you know.
Beatles, definitely. I 100% understand that, growing up in a family that listened to Beatles all the time. So that would be probably maybe a number 1 spot. Who else?
I think so. I think number 1 as far as songwriting, for sure.
Yeah.
I think another influence is the Beach Boys, the harmonies, and Brian Wilson's writing. Like I don't think people give enough credit to his ability to write a song with like the interesting harmonic changes and the layered harmonies. And like I could just go on forever about them. I just think they're incredible, and I think that they don't get enough. I think they get a lot of love, but I don't think they get enough love for like how talented Brian Wilson is at writing a song. And he's a front man who plays bass, and so you know that's like an inspiration for me also, because it's more common now, but it was really uncommon growing up as like someone who was learning to play, especially as a female. Not to harp on that by any means, but like I didn't see a lot of people who were doing that.
And I also agree with the front men and women playing bass, which is, I'm kind of a fan of some of the 90s, when the 90s came through, some of the rocker bands that were woman fronted. They were bass players up there. I love that. Susanna Hoffman of I forget the name. You remember Walk Like an Egyptian from the 80s? I'm a little older, but that she was a bass player. She played the bass. And she did her thing. So
cool. Also Hoffman, you know. So
there you go. Oh yeah, I didn't even think of that. Yeah. So there goes Doug running in the background.
Yeah, that's Hazel. She'll be in the background.
That's cool. All right, so we got 2 so far. Let's grab a couple more.
Yeah, I'll give you 2 at once. Okay. So I think Carole King and James Taylor, big influences. Yeah. Love James Taylor. I think just there's something to be said for like being a singer-songwriter who can just like melt your heart with an acoustic guitar. He's one of my favorite performers and musicians. Carole King, just as a writer and you know performer herself, like writing songs for so many other people. And I think that's 4, right? I think we're
that's pretty solid.
I would say I don't know if this is like would be in 5th place. I just would throw them in as an influence. The Hollies are a big influence as far as like sonic production, and again, I guess like writing songs with like very interesting changes and progressions. I think that's something that's really important to me, to just like like be really creative in that way. As a trained musician, I'm like, I want to use this training to like really write interesting pieces.
Yeah, think outside the box a little bit, be a little avant-garde with the songwriting, a little experimental, the arrangements. Yeah. And I noticed some of that stuff. I mean, your EP, in terms of the arrangements, it's it's a little bit experimental. I think it's more experimental in terms of some of the instrumentation and effects that are used in there, because it's got a little bit of trippiness, and to me it was slightly theatrical in a sense as well, which I was digging. And so let's talk about the new single that's coming up. So are you still in the works with that one, or have you already tracked that in 10 minutes?
It was actually 5 minutes. I'm
Right.
No, so that was a 1-day tracking as well. I think that was cool to spend a full. I think we did a 10-hour, 10-hour day on one song, and so like I got to give a little more attention to that song.
Yeah.
And then this will be my second time doing this just solo, and so I was like, I kind of like I'm getting my stride, knowing what I'm doing now. So that one. What was your question about that one?
Well, I just want to know more about it. I wanted to see if it was recorded. Has it been mixed, mastered? Yeah. Is there a release date? What's the title of it?
Yep. Okay, so it's called Goose. I think I'm going to maybe tack on a sub name. I don't know what you call that, in parentheses to it. And it is fully recorded. I am going to be hearing shortly about the mixing and mastering. And so there's usually a little back and forth with how I'd like that to be done. Generally, I don't have a specific date, but we're going to do an early 2025 release, hopefully, if everything goes smoothly.
Do you sit in for the mixing sessions or anything like that?
I haven't. I have, I guess, in the past with full band stuff, but it's usually kind of like I'll get a bounce. I'm working with someone I really trust and admire as far as their skills in like mixing and mastering, and so we have a pretty good understanding, I think, of what I'm looking for, especially after having done the last 3 songs. Yeah. So usually I get a bounce and then I send back notes, and then like maybe there's a little back and forth, but it's pretty virtual, I guess you would say. Do
you for you to be able to play sitar like that and all those instruments, you have to own one, right? I mean, you have these instruments at home?
I have some instruments at home. I think one of the perks of working with a studio is that they do have the gear that we're like, I'm looking for example, like if I'm wanting to play a real Rhodes, I don't own one. So, there's that. I do have a little setup here at home.
This has already been really fun. I really appreciate you doing it. So we're looking for Goose's, hopefully early 2025. We'll keep a lookout for that. Are there any other projects you're working on right now in terms of the fashion stuff or other music or anything like that?
As far as other music goes, I feel like as soon as I start recording something, I'm like, oh, I have an idea for like a whole album. So I'm brewing on something. I don't think I want to release those thoughts yet, but I am brewing on a possible other, like maybe mini EP or something like that, attached to Goose. I think that there are some themes there that might become a real bigger project.
Right. Cool.
And the fashion stuff, it's fun for me. I work with a professional photographer who's kind of related, not by blood, but relative. And that's just really fun for me. I think it's fun to use like visuals to promote my music, and just as somebody who enjoys like design and fashion, and something I kind of like always wanted to go into and didn't go into because I went into another passion of mine. It's just a great outlet. So I think probably some shoots coming up in the future soon, definitely surrounding the EP, or the single. The
single for now. You've given away too much info already.
I know. I'm like, what can I say?
So it is an EP. No,
gotta keep some mystery in there.
Yeah. So I think that's cool too. The fact that you're visually an artist, you're a visual artist as well. How you can and you're very into fashion. I think all those things you can combine into your other. I think all those things feed into each other in terms of the artistries. You know what I mean? Like the music could go into they all coincide. Here's something I want to ask. Last question, I promise, and I'll let you go. But
no, okay.
And because you have the visual, and everything, the fashion, the visual, and the music. Have you ever thought about music video, doing something? Yeah,
it's been on the agenda a couple times. Kind of like, I think the short answer is yes.
if you really think about it, I mean, you have time to create your own music. You have time to focus on some of the fashion. You have time to focus on some of the visual art. You have a way to combine them all together, and you teach music. So you've surrounded yourself with your passions, and that is a success. You know what I mean? In all honesty. So, I mean, congratulations on that. No, I think it sounds cheesy, I know, but I think that people like, look at success as being an artist in any kind of way, only in a funnel view. It's like either you're going to get rich doing this or you're not, and it's like, no, that's not what a term of success really is. You know what I mean? Like, you've surrounded yourself and engulfed yourself in your creative assets, and I'm positive you love teaching music. You have to love teaching music. You're molding the minds you're teaching someone about your passion. You know what I mean? So it's like that's like a thing that's a huge, plus, when you're teaching students, depending on how old they are, and I know from experience, you a lot of the time you can learn something from them too.
It's really important as far as like shifting your mindset to think, well, I'm so happy when I'm writing. Like when I'm writing, I'm the happiest. I'm just so like that is my sweet spot. So it's exactly. Like, well, I'm doing that for me, like a job is a job. Like, I mean, I think everyone, like, we all go to work and we do, whether you're doing what you love or not, it's a job, and you're doing it ultimately to like have a living. And I think that when you can do something that brings you an incredible amount of joy, and especially if that like kind of spills over into your work, I think that
brilliant.
That's really serving you. And to your point, like it's serving my students as well, because they can see like I love music, and they, they may not all grow up and be musicians, and that's okay. And I think they just see that I have a passion for it, and I encourage, if that's what they want to do, and if they don't want to do that full time or whatever, I mean, they can still enjoy learning as they grow up. And it's nice to see somebody who's like, I love this and I want to share it with you.
Yeah. And you know what? Some of them will.
Yeah.
And you will be a part of that person becoming that person. How crazy is that? That to me is nuts.
I can't wait till somebody calls me, from
20 years back. Yeah.
You remember me? You were my teacher.
I bet you that's going to happen. I mean, it's, especially for someone that really falls in love with it, they're going to be like, oh yeah, Elisabeth Hoffman, Miss Hoffman, you taught me, and, now I'm doing this. Here's my new record. That's going to happen. That at least is going to have, the very least, someone's going to be like, I don't know if you remember me, but you taught me like 10 years ago. And, I loved your class and you inspired me, whatever. I came out with a record. I wanted to send it to you. You're going to be like, this is like a gift to you, like that's amazing, Well,
sometimes, all it is like an encouraging word, sometimes it's just like, it could be the smallest thing that you don't know. Cause I remember being younger and full of doubt. Like, I think I love singing. I don't want to sing in front of people, like, things like that. And like there in my life, there was encouraging voices that were like, hey, like you should continue that, here's something in you, sometimes that's all it is. So I think, I
to
agree.
Be that for you to be that voice is important, I think.
Exactly. And I hope that I can touch someone in the same way. And
beautiful. All right, thank you so much for doing it, Elisabeth Hoffman. All right, so we're Quo Vadis is already out. That's on Spotify. You can check that out everywhere. The links will all be there in the review. Looking forward to Goose. I'm going to check in. If I don't see it by, March, I'm going to hit you up and be like, where's Goose?
You'll see it.
Okay, cool. And thank you so much again for doing this. Super appreciate it.